Hello, everyone. Have you ever wondered what role testing plays in pastoral counseling assessment? That's the question we're going to answer in this edition of Dr. Todd Explains. Sometimes pastoral counselors or church-based counselors can become overly enamored with results from tests and inventories, psychological tests and inventories. So much so that the individual sitting across from these counselors becomes not much more than a score or a label based on those tests. And that is a very dangerous way to assess people. I recall when I was a younger person, my father had gotten sick and died of leukemia at the early age of 56. And so it scared me into going to the doctor to get the annual physical. At that time, I was in my early 30s, I believe. And the doctor ran some blood tests, and the next thing I know, he's calling me into his office. And of course, in light of my father's recent death, I was terrified. And he told me that, well, there was some abnormalities there and everything, and it kind of scared me. So I went to another physician, and the physician sat down with me, and he took more blood work, but he also took an extensive interview. He ran some other observational type tests, and what he concluded was, well, that's really not what that first doctor had said. And he said, you got to be very careful when you're diagnosing, that you don't diagnose just based on a lab result. And that really has resonated with me over the years, because if something as definitive as some type of blood test, if that's not enough for a complete diagnosis, then how much more so would that be true for psychological testing? So I tell you that story to say, listen, the person is more than the label of the test. But does that mean that testing has no role? Well, no, it has a role in pastoral counseling. But let me explain to you how you need to kind of incorporate testing. In the assessment process, there are probably 4 elements, let's say. Testing of which is one. But the first element would be observations. So you're sitting with a person and you notice that his hair's messed up. He looks like he's slept in his clothing 3 or 4 days in a row. He smells bad, those kind of things. So the observations you make are part of that assessment. Second, and probably most important, is the interview, the actual sitting down, talking to the person in a semi-structured way to make sure you're ruling out a bunch of things by asking good questions. So you've got observations and the interview. Now, a third part, which can be very important, but you don't always get this, but when you do, it's a very good thing, is the role that I call them TPRs, third-party reports. So if the family member's sitting there with you and says something, or if you somehow find out another way, I don't know, they send you an email or whatever, those can be very helpful as well, because you don't know if the person's telling you the truth, but that's not definitive, but it's part of the puzzle. It's part of the story that you're putting together as you're trying to understand this person and their problems. So you've got observations, you've got the interview, you've got the TPRs or the third-party reports, and then you've got testing. Now, testing needs to be used judiciously and cautiously, but it can be very good for confirming preliminary type diagnoses that you're developing or that you're formulating. But when you use testing, you got to make sure you're using the right kind of test. Tests need to be what's called valid and reliable. By being valid, it needs to measure what it says it measures. And being reliable, it needs to be consistent. So if that person were to take that test 5 or 10 times, they're going to get a similar result 5 or 10 times. One of the issues we run into in the pastoral counseling world is there are many tests out there that are offered, but they're not either valid or reliable or neither. One example that I think would be reliable because it gives you a consistent result, but it's not valid, would be a spiritual gifts inventory. When you think about spiritual gifts inventories, what it's really saying, it measures is the gifts the Spirit has given you. Well, if that's the case, you shouldn't have any gifts if you're an unbeliever. Yet, if you give that test or one of those inventories to an unbeliever, you will get a result every single time. The true way to measure that would be simply to, let's say, hold a big evangelism meeting, give everybody the spiritual gifts inventory. It should be 0. Give the message, the invitation. Conversions are experienced, and give it to them on the backside of that, and any difference should be the work of the Spirit. Well, I don't think that's how that works. I think spiritual gifts inventories are helpful in finding what people are either talented at or enjoy doing. I think that's what their role is, but they're not valid in the sense that they're measuring necessarily gifts from the Spirit. Henry Blackaby would argue that God will give you a task and then He will equip you. So you're not going to necessarily find your true spiritual gifting. What you'll find is what you tend to be pretty good at or what you tend to enjoy doing. And that'll be pretty reliable. In other words, it'll be consistent over time. So that would be an example of that. Other tests are almost like fads in nature. They come and they go. But many times in the church, by the time they melt down into the church, they're not viewed very critically. And so some of the background of those tests are not, the reliability or the validity even of them are not good. I won't mention any names here, but we could talk for a while on that. The bottom line is the use of testing should be supportive. It should support what you're already doing by working through with the observations, the interviews, and any TPRs or third-party reports, so that it can just help confirm or deny. What should have happened in my case with the medical situation is that doctor should have asked me more thorough interview questions and done some more diagnostic stuff that way, and then come up with that kind of report, or using the test to work, because the test in and of itself was very sketchy at best. It was kind of one of those borderline things, which ended up being nothing. But he had me scared to death because he was acting like it was emphatically, this is what it is. So remember, when you're using testing, it's fine, but it's only part of the story. And at that point, it's more of a confirming or a supportive part of the story instead of a definitive part of the story, as far as that goes, as far as regular pastoral counseling goes. Well, I hope this has been helpful. If you enjoy the work I'm doing here, please hit that like and subscribe button. Otherwise, I'll see you on the next video. God bless. We'll talk again soon.